So, I have a confession to make. When it comes to YouTube as a whole, I'm not actually a brand new creator, but as someone who has grown very slowly, I've long felt new, and it's been strange to find myself looking up to or admiring people who are actually newer to the platform than me. But I'll say this, when it comes to the more traditional style of BookTube content, I am very much a new creator. While I've always called myself a BookTuber, most of my content didn't fit the typical mold. I've never done book hauls, TBRs, or tags. In fact, I only learned what a tag was a few weeks ago. Instead, my content has mostly been essays, with a particular emphasis on Twilight. I've done a lot of explained videos and fan theories, and my filming style has developed slowly. That said, I've long wanted to do more bookish style content. For my existing subscribers, I don't plan to stop creating content related to Twilight, and I still want to do plenty of essays and opinions. But I do want to start doing more casual content like hauls, reading wraps, and TBRs. I've also started talk to the camera videos, and while there have been some rocky starts, I do feel like I'm finding my voice. I was just accepted into the partial YouTube Partner Program, which means that, officially, I'm a partner. I just don't have access to AdSense yet. But all in all, this feels like a new beginning for me, and I want to start connecting to people here. Before we dive in, I'm Riley, and this is Otherworldly Fiction. As I've said before, I talk about books, share opinions, and obsess over Twilight, though I also offer the occasional writing advice. If you'd like to help me find my peers and turn on AdSense, hit that subscribe button. Without further ado, here are the questions. The first question asks why I started this channel. Ever since I was a little kid, I've loved books. When it came to actually reading, I was a bit of a late bloomer. When I reached first grade, I couldn't read, and before long, my teacher noticed something was wrong. She realized I was just looking at the pictures, because I still enjoyed handling books. And after observing me, she helped my parents to get me a diagnosis of autism. Now, once people started working with me, everything changed. And by the third grade, I wasn't only a proficient reader, but a promising writer. Teachers started reading my work out to class, and I read voraciously. Now that I'm in my mid-20s, my passion for books, whether that's reading them or writing them, hasn't faded. And I started this channel with a desire to read more, but also to connect with those who might enjoy the books I hope to write someday. The second question asks, what are some fun and unique things you can bring to YouTube? One thing that makes me different is that I'm also a writer, which means I also enjoy books from a writer's perspective. As such, I'll pay attention to a writer's word choices, their style of storytelling, and I'll gravitate towards the kinds of stories I'd like to write, including those outside my genre. Although I primarily enjoy fantasy, I do enjoy other genres, and I feel like the blend of what I like could contribute to more unique conversations, such as talking about a book people have forgotten or exploring underappreciated genres. I like many of the popular books as well, like ACOTAR, and I plan to read Fourth Wing, but I hope to dive into the work of everyone from Shirley Jackson to the Bronte sisters. So I feel my perspective on reading will be rounded out, even with an emphasis on fantasy. The third question asks, what are you most excited for on your channel? I'm excited to start connecting with people. Since I showed my face, the comments have been that much more meaningful. I've gotten comments before like, love the video, or hope this channel grows. And those are always wonderful. But now I'm getting long chunks of text where people share their thoughts. And those are the best, because that's what any creator wants. You want to feel like you're having a conversation with someone. and that you're contributing something to that conversation. I've even enjoyed the comments where people disagreed with me, to a point, because so far, most, with the exception of one, have kept it polite, and that's what I want. If I start a debate and get someone thinking, even if it's to disagree with me, then I've done my job. I've started a discussion I felt needed to happen, and that's a good feeling, to know you've had even a small impact and gotten people thinking. Question number 4 is, why do you love reading? You would think this would be an easy question to answer, given how obsessed I am with books, but it probably boils down to several reasons. The most obvious is that it offers escapism. As a kid, I was always off in my own imaginary world. I was reading fantasy books, playing video games, or running around outside pretending to kill orcs with a bamboo stick. For me, imagining that I lived somewhere more fantastical always made life more exciting. Obviously, I know the difference between fantasy and reality, but there's that part of me left from childhood that likes to pretend. And I think I love reading for the same reasons I love writing. To live in another world, but also to explore different characters. I tend to prefer character-driven work, so I always love exploring the psychology and backstories of characters. I like getting to know their hobbies, their fears, their quirks, and their histories. And watching characters develop relationships or work through their traumas fascinates me, whether I'm writing them or reading about them. 5th question is, what book series got you into reading? I know it's the cliche, but Harry Potter was huge for me as a kid. It started with my dad reading it to me, and eventually I started reading them on my own. I then made a point of rereading them whenever I could, and we always watched the films. Of course, while Harry Potter was the biggest main series for me, there were others, and my passion for reading started even before I could read. My parents read a lot to me as a kid. A lot of my books were just cool. They had moving parts, pop-out pictures, or glow-in-the-dark ghosts. My mom made a point of bringing me award-winning books with gorgeous illustrations. But I was also a big Clifford fan, and even when I couldn't read, I always had my parents reading to me. The earliest memory I have of speaking out a paragraph was from a Clifford book. And of course, I read it awkwardly, but I was just happy because I was reading. From early toddlerhood, I could even credit Winnie the Pooh for making me love reading. Because, in addition to the movies and the toys, I had this giant book with all the collected stories. I loved everything about Winnie the Pooh. And I remember feeling so proud when I was able to open this big volume and read it on my own. So while Harry Potter can be credited for cementing my love of reading, Winnie the Pooh technically started it. If you want your kid to be a reader, it's important to start as early as you can, with whatever is available at their age level. The 6th question is, what question would you ask your favorite booktubers? How do you make your room so pretty? Every booktuber that blows up always has these gorgeous bookshelves. There are candles and soft light streaming in from the windows, and it makes me jealous. I feel like when I film my videos, I look like I'm in a goblin cave. So that would be my big question. How do you make everything look so aesthetic? Also, what would be your recommendations for affordable bookshelves? Is IKEA any good? It's a dream of mine to have that room full of books where I can film. I want to be able to have a big shelf of books behind me when I'm talking. So I'd honestly love recommendations on the best shelving, as well as tips on how to make my space a more pleasant place to be in. On a more serious note, how do you deal with toxic people? I recently received a strongly worded comment that made me question the point of what I was even doing. The comment made me feel so bad about myself that I even considered quitting YouTube. Not because I thought the person was right, though they certainly planted in me self-doubt that wasn't there before, but because of the fear of other comments I might receive. Not only from this person, but others. Obviously, I'd like to start this year on a positive note. And with my recent acceptance into the partner program, I feel like my channel is going in the right direction. But that would be my biggest question. How do you deal with the haters while still protecting your mental health? The 7th question asks, what challenges will be the hardest with BookTube? If I'm being honest, the hardest thing is not comparing yourself to others. Even though I expect to monetize this channel eventually, it can still be easy to fall into the trap of feeling like you're not good enough and wondering what you're doing wrong. I'll see a creator post one video, which will blow up to thousands of views, and with only 8 videos, they'll have 10,000 subscribers. Within 1 month, they'll be monetized without any fancy editing or hot topics. All they'll do is a book tag or a haul, and when I do the same thing and only get 20 views, even after 3 years of being on here, that can be discouraging. It can be hard to see someone achieve your dream with 1 video, and to know that you'll have to do 100 videos for every one of theirs to reach the same place. But everyone's journey is different. I know there are probably other creators looking at me and wishing they had what I had. I can remember looking at channels with 200 subscribers and thinking, I'd be happy if I had that. That channel is going somewhere. I am hoping things will pick up this year. I do feel that showing my face has made a significant difference because people like to be able to connect with you, and community is a big part of BookTube. There's also a part of me that's getting nervous because now that people are starting to respond to my videos, there's this realization that what I say will affect people. I could be the reason someone does or doesn't do something, and knowing you have that kind of power can be kind of terrifying. It can be easy to start second-guessing yourself once people do start paying attention, because suddenly there are all these eyes on you, and you have to hope you don't say the wrong thing. And I don't mean saying something controversial, though that's a concern in itself, but just saying something that could potentially have a negative impact on someone, like giving them bad advice or not giving the right context for something they might act on. I'm in this in-between place of not quite breaking through and starting to break through, and both sides of that are scary in their own way. It's hard not to be seen, but I have to consider that being seen could be difficult too, especially as hate comments become more frequent and I open myself to serious criticism, including that which could negatively affect my mental health. Question number 8 is, when did you start reading? As I said before, I couldn't read until grade 1. However, I've loved books since I could walk. My parents made a point of reading to me. They started with books that were interactive or that had gorgeous illustrations. I remember some of my books actually had textures in them, like the shirt a character was wearing would be soft or a tree would be bumpy. Every Halloween, I'd have my dad read this book to me. It had witches and ghosts, but the ghosts were glow in the dark, so we'd hold the pages under my lamp and then turn out the light, and I'd stare at the pictures until they had completely faded out, and we'd do it all over again. Before I could even read, I had all of these books that fascinated me. My mom has good taste, so she knew what stories would grab me. When I got older, I also had lots of trips to the library. I'd go to my grandparents in the summer, and I'd go to their local library and come away with armfuls of books. That's when I started discovering books on my own that I'd picked, and the Warriors books, a fantasy series about cats, became a huge go-to for me. Question number 9 is, where do you read? Personally, I prefer to read at home. I'll read in bed if I can, but otherwise the couch will do. The main thing is that it has to be quiet. I could never read or write in a cafe because I find the noise distracting, and I'm not one of those people who can concentrate if there's music playing. Sometimes I can read when I'm waiting for the bus, but I find this hard because I'm tense the whole time, wondering if I'll have to scramble for my card, and I like to be able to relax when I'm reading. There's also the risk that if I read during my commute, I'll miss my stop, as I can get really invested. It's so easy for people to scare me if I'm in the middle of a book. The whole world just disappears if it's a really good book. Question number 10 is, what kinds of books do you read? My favorite genre is fantasy, a passion that was started by Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings. I was always obsessed with magic, castles, and monarchs. As a little kid, I made up my own world filled with imaginary races, monsters, and countries, many of which still survive in some form in my writing now. Even within fantasy, I read widely, and it largely depends on my mood. Some weeks, I'm in the mood for YA fantasy, such as The Cruel Prince, while at other times, I prefer epic fantasy, such as the works of Brandon Sanderson. I enjoy YA, epic, and urban fantasy, but anything supernatural or paranormal I will do. And I love horror that has a magical component, like a ghost or monster, even if it's more psychological in focus. However, while fantasy is my main genre, I also enjoy classic literature, particularly those written by female authors. Jane Austen is my favorite classic writer, and I've loved all of the books by the Bronte sisters so far. I'd love to do a deep dive into older classics and try out the work of George Eliot and Virginia Woolf. Over October, I also discovered I enjoy Gothic literature. It's not fantasy, but it often has fantasy touches or is written in a fantasy style. I fell in love with the work of Angela Carter and Shirley Jackson, and I've always been a huge Anne Rice fan, so I definitely enjoy a Gothic story, whether it has fantasy or not. Finally, I enjoy dystopian novels. I don't go out of my way to read them, but I've loved each one I've read. The Hunger Games is my favorite dystopia series, but I've enjoyed other books, including The Giver, Shatter Me, and The Chrysalids. If there's one genre I'd like to try, it's thriller. I'm more interested in psychological thrillers though, and I'd better enjoy a story where someone loses their mind in a house than I would a straight-up murder mystery or high-stakes action sequence. I pulled an all-nighter reading Room, and Wuthering Heights has elements of the thriller too, with its focus on a dysfunctional relationship. A story that focuses on trauma, family dysfunction, psychological problems, or something that otherwise zeroed in on a character and their reaction to a strange situation would suit my taste. I almost feel like what I'm looking for would be something between a thriller and a drama. Something like Joker, where it's technically a drama, but there's a lot of dark backstory and tragedy. That sounds terrible, but I'd like to explore psychological thrillers or more messed up dramas. I haven't been able to start exploring the genre yet because I have too many books and authors I want to read in the genres I've listed, but it's one I'd like to dive into eventually. I'm looking forward to becoming more a part of this community. I've been at the fringes for a while, but I'm passionate about books, and I'm excited to start having conversations about everything book-related, such as my thoughts on books old and new, my opinions relating to the community or the publishing industry, and why I love reading. I know I cheated with this tag, but I've never done one before, and I thought this would be a good way to introduce myself. I feel like I'm at the beginning of something, even though I've been on YouTube for a few years. And I've started following more booktubers as well. I've already done a TBR video focusing on the fantasy books I want to read this year, which you can click on the left, and I gave a bit of a rant about BookTube itself on the right. Thank you for watching, and happy reading!